Hello, everyone. This is Ricky Rios. I'm here to give my presentation on inclusive leadership AEP for AEP 555. Some of the goals I hope to accomplish during this presentation is develop a better understanding of what models and challenges of inclusive leadership look like in other organizations. Determine how these models and ideals may be applied to the administration field. And then lastly, steps to having inclusive leadership in the school and how these different models that I looked at are going to help achieve that goal. Um, so the two different groups that I looked at for the inclusive leaders, their inclusive leadership models was the Special Olympics Project Unify. It's a school program that hopes to include both disabled and non-disabled youth. The primary targets for leaders are youth who possess or have the ability to possess specific leadership qualities. And lastly, their ultimate goal is to reduce the dropout rate in schools via their inclusive leadership model. The second one was called Deloitte, the Deloitte Company, second largest professional services network. It has about 225,000 employees, actually over 225,000 employees. And their model looked to reduce biases that are conscious and unconscious. To do this, they look to point out the things that people are biased towards in several different categories and then reduce that bias. The main bias that they've typically found via their studies is that people are drawn to others just like themselves in any category: race, age, sex, cultural views. And then because of that, it also excludes other people. So first one I'm going to look at is Project Unify, and I'm not going to read verbatim everything that I came up with about Project Unify, but they do use the Kouzes and Posner leadership model to identify characteristics that the youth leaders must possess. They also have adult allies, and these adult allies are people that help guide the leadership process within the school and help the young leaders continue to grow as they do their leadership in the school, their inclusive leadership in the school. So the 5 different parts to the Kouzes and Posner leadership model: model the way, inspire shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. So I'm briefly going to go over each one of those and they had 2 to 4 different characteristics for each one in the Project Unify model. So model the way, one of the things they're going to do is they're going to understand who they are as a leader and identify how to use leadership skills. So they're going to point those things out, and understand that I'm a leader and here's how I'm going to use my leadership skills within the school. Second one, inspire a shared vision. Youth leaders demonstrate the belief that youth can make a difference in their schools, communities, and the broader society, leading to a better future. They're not just looking to include everybody in school, but they also want to be a part of their life outside of school. They want to be leaders outside of school as well and continue on with being a leader as they get done with school. Challenge the process. Youth leaders embrace change as a natural part of growth. And then these leaders also develop skills to advocate both individually and collaboratively. They're learning already that they can't do everything on their own, but they can also help others. I think this is going to be a big one where the adult allies come through and show kids that things are going to change. You're going to have to change as a leader. You're going to have to help others as a leader. Enables others to act. Youth leaders build and sustain strong, meaningful relationships. They're not just a flash in the pan sort of thing. They want to have these leaders that keep going. They help anybody and everybody. And at the same time, they're also going to know when it's time to be a follower. At a young age and in an inclusive school model, kids aren't always going to be the leaders in some situations. Your teachers and administrators are also going to be leaders, have to be leaders in that time too. And then the last one, encourage the heart. The youth leaders develop the skills to reflect and celebrate both individually and collaboratively. Ultimately, it's the good parts in life. Understand what you've done good and what others have done good and celebrate it with them. Deloitte, one of the things that they had was a quote on the first thing that I saw in their model: no leader is an island working on a team. Everybody has to work together. And you put yourself on an island, you're not getting the crossover between all the other people you could be drawing on, and you're also not helping others that you need to be helping. Their goal is to understand the different challenges that reduce the inclusive leadership model, thusly reducing the voice of others. So what they did is they developed a number of challenges and then offered the strategies on how to circumvent these problems, these challenges that occur. One of the things they came up with was the first speaker advantage. This kind of just means that The first person to talk, a lot of people kind of go along with that person's idea, whereas they try to make sure everybody knows, hey, we've got a meeting come up, put down your thoughts, and you'll get a chance to share it. They're already looking to not just make it about the manager or the boss. They want everybody to be included with what they're doing. Loudest voice rollers, that's pretty self-explanatory. The person who has the floor the longest has the loudest voice. Sometimes that's the person that people listen to the most often. That's not a very social environment. If somebody's always just looking at one person talking, you have a tendency sometimes to tune them out. And then bias to groupthink was one of their other challenges. And that's where everybody votes the same way because the leader or a certain person who is looked upon says, I think this is a good idea. So everybody starts to vote the same way and say, I think this is a good idea too. They had what was called the devil's advocate, and that was the person that had to be contrary to what the rest of the group had. I've also heard it called the 10th man. If you have 9 people that vote one way, the 10th person, it's their job to come up with that contrary or different point of view to create a more diverse thinking environment. So for their culture, they have what's called the Deloitte Diversity Inclusion Business Integration Wheel. And it's this big wheel. It's got 2 big indicators on the outside, talent and enterprise. And then underneath that, they've got 8 different components and 4 under each one of those. And then there's even littler ones that I chose not to go into for the sake of time. But under talent, they had selection, talent identification, reward, flexibility. Each one of these is a specific way that they're going to get other people involved, like for selection and talent identification. It's not just, they made sure that it's not just looking at a name on a resume and going, that person looks good for the job, let's take them. They look at the credentials and throw out the name and see what everybody has to offer. Doesn't really matter where they're from or what their beliefs are. It's who they are, what they can do for their job. And then for the enterprise, the 4 components under there were leadership, commitment, risk management, values, and customer. And this even went as far to say, culturally, we're not just going to sell things in one language. We got to make sure we are bilingual or multilingual in putting an ad out, because we're going to sell more if we do sell it in a different language. Like things like risk management, that's the 10th man approach, making sure that we're not just doing a group think. Everybody has a say. And if we're all coming up with the same idea because we're all gravitating towards somebody who has the same idea, then we need to implement a system, and that system's being used to come up with more diverse ideas. And then they also had things like psychological safety guards, where no person feels that they'll be rejected, embarrassed, or punished for having a different idea. All ideas to make sure everybody's included and everybody has a say in their job. Okay, so I took those 2 different models, and then I kind of came up how I would or can right now, create a more inclusive leadership system in the school. So I thought the steps to having inclusive leadership in the school: development of inclusive leadership programs that can work from the top down. So that's from administrative all the way down to your students. So administrators, teachers, support staff, parents, and students all have a common goal to create an inclusive environment. And then identification of roadblocks to the success that, are blocking you from being an inclusive school. And then what strategies are in place already that can create an inclusive environment. So for development, you need people who will work to create an inclusive environment already. That can be leaders and can be leaders to others. Literature that will promote a school first attitude. Your literature that you give out on the first day of school can say, we're going to be an inclusive school. We want everybody to have a say. We want our students to be leaders. We want our janitor to be a leader. We want our students to go to our janitor, our lunch lady, to be able to talk to kids and be a leader in a lot of different ways. And then developments of strategies on how a fully inclusive school will be created. You're not just going to go there and go, we're going to have an inclusive school. There has to be a plan. What's your plan going to be, to create a fully inclusive school? That would be very similar to the things that like the Project Unify had. they had a plan. This is what our student leaders look like, and this is how our adults are going to help them. Well, conversely, you're going to need a plan for your adults. This is what we want our adult leaders to look like, and here's how they're going to help others. And then steps taken to include parents in the inclusive leadership program. Parents in this day and age are involved. They need to be involved. It builds a more community-based school, one where everybody feels like, it's a family within the school. You want everybody to know everybody and everybody to get along. I understand some bigger schools that's not always going to be possible, but it isn't going to hurt to start to do it anyways. So acquisition of talent. You got to have an objective process on how staff will be acquired to create an inclusive school. This would diminish the bias and allow for more than one person to interview if needed. I think sometimes in the school setting, administrators see a name on the top of the paper and they go, "Oh, I know that person. I think they'd be a good teacher," and I don't think that's always the best way to do it. Just because you know somebody doesn't always mean that they're going to be an inclusive person. It's still a job. People are still there to get paid. You want to get people that are there to do the same thing that you're doing. So what will your interviewers look for in character or achievements or both? Are you just looking for a good person, or are you looking for somebody who is smart, has a good character, or is it going to be somebody that has a lot of achievements? What have they done? What can they bring to your school to help it be a better school? And then what steps are taken before the interview process? Once again, the I know this person situation, not always the best candidate. What students meet the characteristics of an inclusive leader already? So do you have students in your school already that are leaders? Can you take that a step further and help them foster their leadership skills to be more well-rounded and be involved in different things? And that would be very similar to your staff processes. What teachers do you have or support staff do you have already that are good leaders? Do you have somebody that is a social butterfly that can get people involved? It's going to be different at every school. So what are some of the roadblocks? Communication, groupings, ideologies. Do you have a group of fourth grade teachers that don't talk very well? They don't tend to get along. Maybe they're not the best group, or maybe we're going about wrong how they need to be talking to each other. That's not very inclusive if you have 3 or 4 teachers that don't talk to each other all the time. So we've got to find a process to getting them involved, and that might be putting 2 groups together and having them brainstorm ideas to make certain situations work better, to get more people involved. Maybe you just have people that their ideologies are completely different and they look for different things from different people. Leaders that are actively investigating situations where others may be excluded. This might be where you have a human resources situation or a risk management in some schools. If you've got a process involved of how you're going to be an inclusive school, maybe you need to have, and they're not being done, maybe you need to have an outside source come look at it and say, well, we're trying to create an inclusive school, but we've got a group over here that doesn't like talking to this group, and we've got to find a way to make them come together and communicate better. Development of interventions into those settings that are not inclusive. So what settings do you have where people aren't being included and people aren't involved? What's going to be the way that we get around that? And what changes need to be made? So what things are inclusive? Identifying the situations or settings that promote an inclusive environment. Do you have staff that are already doing this? Do you have students that are already doing it? Parents, do you have a parent on your PTA that says, hey, we were doing this fundraiser, you should come? Those are good people to already start with to get more people involved. And those people can help other people branch out and get even more people involved. You already have groups. Do you have a student group in your school that is a real popular group that a lot of kids are already coming to? Have some of those kids try to join other groups, make everybody feel involved. Leaders who are already understanding where inclusion is occurring and what can be generalized understanding. So that's kind of goes back to, we already have a big group. What else can we do? All right. So creating a fully inclusive school, it's not just a done overnight sort of thing.